300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Boy, was some news dropped. A sports bombshell in the NFL just dropped this morning. They released week 1 of the NFL schedule. I'm going to tell you who is headlining that matchup and what to think. I guess some contentious relationship going on with Tim Tebow and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not everyone's on board with that decision, and much more. In fact, a dark horse Super Bowl contender has just emerged this offseason based on one acquisition from yesterday. And the Phoenix Suns, are they in trouble? Starting to struggle a little bit. That's all coming up towards the end of the show. But we start with the Lakers and the New York Knicks. The Los Angeles Lakers outlasted the Knicks in overtime, 101-99 yesterday. And here's the thing about sports. Sports are all about momentum, especially heading into the playoffs. It's all about who is playing the best basketball at the end of the season, going into the postseason. That's the most important thing. Doesn't matter if you've been the best team all season. Doesn't matter if you've had the best record. Are you clicking on all cylinders at the right time? Is the chemistry there at the most opportune time of the season? And I do want to give a quick shout out to the New York Knicks, because as much as we have admonished the way that they've been run and how they've been a laughingstock in the NBA, this team is a legitimate team. They are a well-disciplined, well-coached team. This was the first month. The month of April was the first winning month that the New York Knicks have had since 2017. They hadn't reached the postseason since 2013. This is a really, really good New York Knicks bunch that plays with a tremendous swagger, tremendous confidence, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Julius Randle has evolved his basketball skills and is unquestionably the most improved player of the season in the NBA. He's been absolutely fantastic. Derrick Rose is finally starting to look like his old self, scoring 27 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. Big shout out to the New York Knicks. This is no longer a laughingstock. This is a legitimate basketball team that has been playing extremely hard, extremely well. I was really, really impressed with them. Again, they have not reached the postseason for 8 seasons. This is going to be the first time since Carmelo Anthony was there that they will reach the postseason. But this wasn't about them yesterday. This was about the Lakers defense and Talen Horton-Tucker having his coming out party and moment for the Lakers. This is a Lakers defense that held the New York Knicks to 15 points in the fourth quarter, 6 points over the final 7 minutes of the game, and only 1 basket in the final 4 minutes of regulation. That's outstanding. That's what their calling card was. And a big catalyst behind that, and the guy who hit the clutchest shots of his young NBA career, was THT. This is a guy in the preseason that we saw. He had blossomed right before our very eyes, had scored over 30 points in some preseason games. And I know you want to snuff at that, but the reality is this was a guy who was just waiting for his opportunity. It was almost like when Kyle Kuzma last year in the bubble, 3 games remaining before the start of the postseason, hits that buzzer beater to beat the Denver Nuggets. This was THT's moment for the Lakers. You didn't have any ball handlers in the game. LeBron was out. Schroeder was out. Caruso had to call it a quits early in the night after re-aggravating his foot injury. And THT comes out, gives you 13 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, hits the go-ahead three-pointer to win the game, hit a clutch three-pointer when the Knicks led by 10 in the fourth quarter. This was one of those moments when you're looking for someone to step up. Anthony Davis, as great as he was a couple nights ago against Phoenix, and as great as he was on the defensive side of the ball, he wasn't having his most efficient shooting night, like 8 for 23. And the Lakers have not been the best team all season. They have not had the best record all year. And they were derailed by injuries, ravaged by injuries. This team just couldn't find any sense of luck along the way. And yet, despite their seeding right now being in the 7th seed, it appears that they're starting to click on all cylinders. And they're starting to find their rhythm right at the perfect time, even though they're not 100% healthy. Even though they're not 100% healthy. And again, there's no question that they're trying to avoid the play-in tournament. No one wants to face Steph right now. But with that defense, and with LeBron and with Schroeder coming back, no one wants to face the Lakers right now either. I mean, you had Drummond giving you a huge night, 16 points, 18 rebounds. This was the first time that it finally appeared that Andre Drummond and Anthony Davis could actually play well together and had some type of harmony. They didn't seem to be clogging up the lane for one another. They were actually complimenting one another. Wesley Matthews hit the big-time putback layup with 3 seconds left to send it into overtime. Also played good defense. Kyle Kuzma's back on the hot train with 23 points. He's been up and down this entire year, especially over the last 5 games. But he found his stroke at the right time, had one of his best games of the season. This was a complete team effort, complete team win. And when you look at the Lakers right now, their situation actually isn't all that bad. Again, they're in the 7th seed, but now the Mavericks and the Blazers both losing yesterday, or the Blazers not winning, rather, the Mavericks losing yesterday now pulls the Lakers within 1 game. The Mavericks are in 6th. The Trailblazers have the head-to-head tiebreak over the Mavericks, so they're in the 5th spot. But when you look at the remaining schedule for both of these teams, it is not inconceivable that the Lakers could find themselves out of the play-in tournament, because they face the Houston Rockets tonight. LeBron may return for that matchup. He may not. And to be honest, I understand why they want to reintegrate him into the lineup, but it almost might behoove the Lakers, and it may be more beneficial to actually rest him against the Houston Rockets tonight so that he can get an additional 3 days of rest before they have to play the Indiana Pacers on the road on Saturday, and then they close out the season against the Pelicans on the road. Those are the last 3 games remaining for the Lakers. You look at the Trailblazers, they've got a brutal 3-game slate. You look at their record and where they're at, they go at Utah, at Phoenix, and then versus the Denver Nuggets. Those are 3 of the top 4 seeds in the Western Conference that are still jockeying for position. Now, fortunately, Utah, in their case, Donovan Mitchell is expected to miss the final 3 games of the regular season. But Phoenix is looking to develop some rhythm, develop some chemistry, and some confidence going into the postseason. The Nuggets still have a lot to play for, chasing the Clippers for that record. So the Trailblazers have a brutal 3-game stretch. Then you look at the Mavericks, it certainly eases up, but they face the Pelicans, the Toronto Raptors, and the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Pelicans still have meaningful basketball games left. They're on the outside looking in, 2.5 games back of the San Antonio Spurs, but they're taking it 1 game at a time. And if the Pelicans win and the Lakers win all 3 of their remaining games, now they're in a top 6 seed. So it's going to be fascinating to see how this all shakes out. But this was a huge win for a Lakers team that, again, not only needed to have it from a record and a standings perspective, but they needed a win like this because with LeBron, Schroeder, Caruso out late in the season, this was the exact same time with 3 games remaining that Kyle Kuzma had his coming out party for the Lakers yet last year. And now THT, just a second-year player out of Iowa State, comes in and absolute balls for the team. This was absolutely massive for the Lakers. And again, big shout out to the Knicks. This is a well-coached team. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be a tough out in the postseason. And speaking of teams in the postseason, the Phoenix Suns have been sliding recently. They lost to the Lakers, obviously, a couple days ago with just Anthony Davis. Now, last night, they fall to the Golden State Warriors 122-116. They were leading by double digits deep into the second half, late in the second half of this game. And there's no question that excluding the Knicks and what they've been able to do, the Phoenix Suns have been the Cinderella team in basketball this year. They went from, the narrative shifted from this was an overachieving squad last year that appeared coming into this year to be a bit of a precocious bunch led by CP3 to all of a sudden being able to roll through the regular season atop the Western Conference with high expectations now heaped onto a team mostly comprised of younger basketball players. And CP3 has been an absolutely tremendous, tremendous addition this year. But what I'm starting to see is that this team is starting to experience the most feared thing in sports: pressure, expectations. When you were consistently winning, when the Phoenix Suns were consistently winning, they didn't have to worry about the pressure because they were just avoiding it. They were playing well. There weren't any concerns. This team was clicking on all cylinders, battling the Utah Jazz for the top spot in the Western Conference. And then you look up, and for a couple weeks, they had the best record in basketball. And so when you're riding this hot wave, there isn't a big deal of criticism launched in your direction, and nor should there be any criticism launched in their direction now. But it appears that some of those complementary pieces, some of those supporting cast players, perhaps are starting to crack. And again, CP3, it's amazing the transformation he's done since his arrival. Because this is a guy who has transformed the confidence and the psyche of this Phoenix Suns team. Again, this was a team battling for the 8th seed last year. Now they are firmly in the number 2 seed in the Western Conference, all because of CP3's arrival. Devin Booker was going to be great either way. DeAndre Ayton's game has elevated because of him. Mikal Bridges, his game is elevated because of CP3. Jay Crowder was a nice, underrated offseason addition. And CP3, again, last night was fantastic. 24 points, 10 assists, 3 rebounds. In fact, the Phoenix Suns scored 18 points in the fourth quarter. CP3 scored or assisted on 16 of those 18 points. In fact, over the final 9:45 of the game, when the Suns scored 16 points, that was all either created or scored directly because of CP3. He's been fantastic, a top 3 MVP favorite in my mind. But now you look up and they've lost 2 straight games. They're no longer going to catch the Utah Jazz for the number 1 record, not only in the NBA, but in the Western Conference. Even though they swept the season series against them, they took all 3. But now you look up, and if you're the Phoenix Suns, the reality is, and it's an unfortunate reality, that it doesn't matter how tremendous of a Cinderella ride you've had this year. All that people are going to remember is whether or not you win and can advance deep into the playoffs. If you lose in the first round, all of that will have been for nothing. And unfortunately for them, the way that the seedings are shaking out right now, if they held as is, the Phoenix Suns would have the most arduous and daunting path to making a deep playoff run than any other team, because right now they're the 2 seed. They'd face the Lakers as the 7 seed. Let's say they won. Now you got the Clippers as the 3 seed, and then you have the Utah Jazz as the number 1 seed. And then if you're able to get out of that gauntlet, you face likely one of the big 3 teams in the Eastern Conference. The Sixers, the Bucks, or the Brooklyn Nets. So I think, unfortunately, the reality is, as great of a season as they have had, I don't think anyone would take the Phoenix Suns over the Lakers right now. And if you're fortunate enough to not face the Lakers, your consolation prize is the hottest player in the NBA right now in Steph Curry, and maybe the team that is buzzing the most right now heading into the play-in tournament. There's a reason why the Lakers are trying to avoid that 7th play-in spot, not just because of the fickle nature and the strong likelihood of, hey, if you lose one, now you're in danger of missing the playoffs completely, but because they know in a 1-game scenario against Steph Curry, that's not a guy you want to face. And even in a 7-game series, the Phoenix Suns sure as hell don't want to face Steph Curry. So they have to be really concerned. If you're the Phoenix Suns, you really have to start getting this together. You only have 3 games left. If for nothing else, even if you can't capture the number 1 overall seed at this point in the year, it's about developing some confidence and continuity going into the postseason. And there haven't been injuries to this team. It's not like they've been missing key guys like the Lakers have had to overcome and deal with, missing key guys during key stretches of the season. That hasn't been the case for the Suns. All of their guys, knock on wood, have been healthy, have been intact, yet it hasn't, at this point, seemed to be crystallizing at the right time, at the opportune time. So the Phoenix Suns have a lot to be concerned about right now heading into this postseason. They are not in a great position as the number 2 seed. Yes, they'll have home court advantage for at least 2 rounds, but I wouldn't feel too confident if I was the Phoenix Suns. They have to start getting this together with 3 games remaining in the regular season. And transitioning to the NFL. So the NFL, I dropped in the teaser, dropped a bombshell to open up this morning. Huge news to start this morning in the NFL. They revealed that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Dallas Cowboys, are kicking off the 2021 NFL season, and they even revealed the entire slate of Week 1 games headlining the NFL season. Really exciting stuff. But what's funny is the NFL often reveals what they think of teams and which teams they value the most in Week 1, especially in their game to kick off the season. And the NFL is a shrewd business operator. You could argue that they operate more shrewdly than perhaps any of the other major leagues in sports because they recognize the bottom line. The bottom line is revenue. The bottom line is viewership and eyeballs. And so what do? They pick the most popular player in the NFL and the most popular, the most recognizable, the most valuable team in sports in America, and they slate them to open up the season. It's absolutely brilliant. You got Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers, and the Dallas Cowboys. Tom Brady and the return of Dak Prescott. The Super Bowl 55 MVP and perhaps the most talked about and discussed quarterback the past 3 off seasons in Dak Prescott. And the money is a really important factor here because this is the ultimate money grab for the NFL, an ultimate money grab for NBC, who's going to be covering this game. Because when you look at the top 30 most watched and highest rated NFL games last year, the 2 teams that were a part of the most watched games in the NFL last year in the regular season The Tampa Bay Buccaneers was 6. 6 of the top 30 most watched games included the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys, who were part of 7 of the top 30 most watched NFL games last season. The Bucs played in the most watched NFL game last year, the season opener against the New Orleans Saints, and the Dallas Cowboys playing the Giants at home in week 3 was the 3rd most highest watched game in the NFL last year. And get this. This is the amazing thing. You look at some of the other teams. The Saints were part of 5 of the top 30 most watched NFL games last year, and 2 of those games involved the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady. The Rams were part of 2 of the top 30 most watched NFL games last year, one of which was against the Cowboys in the season opener. The Seahawks were a part of 4 of the top 30 most watched games of the season last year. One of their opponents was the Dallas Cowboys. The Bears were a part of 2 of the top 30 most watched NFL games last year, one of which included the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Packers, this huge Packers brand, since the Lombardi Trophy was essentially named after them, this huge Packers recognizable brand, they weren't a part of many. They were only a part of 2 of the top 30 most watched NFL games last year, and one of which was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Browns even were part of 2 of the most watched games last year, and one of which was against the Cowboys. The Falcons. There was only one game the Falcons were a part of last year that was one of the top 30 most watched games last season. And you can guess who that was against. The Dallas Cowboys in that bizarre onside kick failure. So what's interesting is you look at Tom Brady, and Tom Brady has, first of all, been a part of the most NFL kickoff games by an NFL player with 4. And he's won the most of those NFL kickoff games with 3 since it became a thing in 2002. So it's a very shrewd move from the NFL. And what they're saying is they want the most assuredness. They want the game that they know without a shadow of a doubt will drive up the most viewership and the most revenue possible. This is their way of making up for all those lost ticket sales last year and less TV revenue last year. This is their way of recouping all of that money. And then when you look at the 2 teams that have driven up the most consistent viewership from last season, the Bucs and the Cowboys, now those 2 teams are slated against one another to open up the season. And from an actual X's and O's standpoint, and when you look at the matchup itself, of course, it's captivating. It's going to be extremely entertaining. You got the Super Bowl champs, Tom Brady returning. All 22 starters from that Tampa Bay Buccaneers starting lineup in the Super Bowl are returning, going up against the Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott's big return, Ezekiel Elliott, all the weapons that they have, Dan Quinn finally getting a chance to institute and implement his new defensive scheme, Micah Parsons, big brand Dallas Cowboys. This is what you crave. It's going to be absolutely fantastic of a matchup. And some of the other notable week 1 matchups, you have the Jets at the Panthers. So Sam Darnold going up against his former squad. That will be extremely entertaining and fun to watch. Going up against the guy in Zach Wilson, who the Jets drafted number 2 overall as the quarterback to replace him. You have the Seahawks at the Indianapolis Colts. Russell Wilson going up against Carson Wentz now in the new look Colts uniform. A potential, perhaps 2 Super Bowl contenders competing in week 1. And then you've got the Browns at the Chiefs. A rematch of the AFC divisional round playoff matchup last season, and 2 of the top teams in the AFC, perhaps an AFC championship preview. So week one's going to be fascinating. Grab your popcorn and just get comfortable on the couch, because that's where you're going to be posted all throughout that weekend. And it isn't surprising at all that the NFL got this right. Super Bowl champs, Tampa Bay, and the most popular sports franchise in America, the Dallas Cowboys, in week one. Should be amazing. Should be amazing. Again, Morning Joe right here, J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. So there are a lot of moves in the offseason that oftentimes fly under the radar. No one talks about it. And this is a team that I always thought was a dark horse Super Bowl contender, but now they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and it's all because of one move. And this story isn't going to be talked about. No talking heads are going to be talking about this underrated move. It isn't going to headline any stories. But the Indianapolis Colts just signed former Pro Bowl left tackle Eric Fisher to a one-year, $9.4 million deal to eventually be the starting left tackle for the Indianapolis Colts. This is a guy who in 2013 was the number one overall pick in the draft, and he has started in 113 of the 117 possible games he could have started in the NFL or could have played in the NFL. Again, a former Pro Bowler. And what happened was he obviously tore his ACL, his Achilles rather, in the AFC Championship game against the Bills. So we know that's why the Chiefs released him. But the hope is that he will be ready to play in September. There's no official timeline, according to the Colts, but the hope is that he will play in September and that he's hopefully will be healthy, right? Ryan Kelly, the All-Pro center, Quentin Nelson, the All-Pro guard. This is a stacked offensive line. Mark Lewinsky, and they have to replace Costanzo, who just retired, and this is the ultimate guy. One of my favorite movies is The Blind Side. The movie that's supposed to be based on a true character, Michael Orr, who played in the NFL for 8 years with primarily the Baltimore Ravens. Right, that movie. And Sandra Bullock plays the mom, and there's a scene where Michael Orr showing up to his first high school football practice, his first official high school football practice, and he doesn't know how to block. He doesn't know how to protect his quarterback or the running back. He has no idea. He's never played organized football before. He's just a huge guy. And Sandra Bullock, the mom, calls him over and recalls a moment in which Michael Orr and her son were in a car together, and they're involved in a car crash and a car accident, and his instinct kicked in, and his instinct led to him shielding off any of the blow from the kid, from the son. His instinct was to protect the son. And Sandra Bullock was basically emphasizing that point, that your job is to go out there and imagine that the quarterback, the running back, those are like your kids. And so once he does that, then he's extremely dominant the rest of the way, not only in those practices, but throughout that entire movie, throughout his entire high school, and then goes on to play college career. The reason I bring that up is I've never been a huge believer in Carson Wentz. I've never been a huge believer in Carson Wentz, but even I have to admit one thing. The guy was sacked 50 times last year, the second most times behind Russell Wilson, who was sacked 52 times, and Carson Wentz only played 12 games. So in 12 games, he was sacked the second most number of times in the NFL. It's hard to be successful that way. It's hard to win games. We saw with Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. It's hard to win games when you are not protected. And the reality is, when you look back at Carson Wentz and the season in which he was the runaway favorite to win the NFL MVP, the year in which he tore his ACL. Prior to that, he had a great offensive line. In fact, according to Pro Football Focus, the Eagles had the number 1 rated offensive line that season. Last year, what do you know with the Colts? They gave up the second fewest sacks in the NFL last year, tied for second with the Green Bay Packers with just giving up 21. Only the Pittsburgh Steelers gave up fewer sacks than the Indianapolis Colts last year. So to me, I like Chris Ballard, the GM, and of course, Frank Reich is who Carson Wentz had his most success with as the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. But it was that offensive line that helped fortify not only the entire offense, but the protection that was needed for Carson Wentz. And I've always been extremely bullish on the Indianapolis Colts. I've always loved their operation. I love their team. They've got a solid core of wide receivers, T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman Jr., Paris Campbell's coming back. He was hurt last year. Jack Doyle, a talented tight end. A great running back in Jonathan Taylor, rushed for 1,169 yards, the third most rushing yards in the NFL last year. Their defense is elite. DeForest Buckner, an all-pro defensive tackle. Darius Leonard, all-pro linebacker. Xavier Rhodes, a former Pro Bowl cornerback. And now they drafted Kwity Paye as a defensive tackle who's projected to start immediately. And he may just be the most talented defensive tackle that came out of the draft this year. I'm extremely bullish about this team, and I think that it's a move like this. Yes, Eric Fisher may not return until week 2, week 3, week 4 in the NFL season, but when he comes back, that will be a monster pickup. In addition, that really they got him fairly on the cheap. It's kind of one of those Jadeveon Clowney prove-it deals on a 1-year contract. And I've always been really high on the Indianapolis Colts. I've always felt like they were one quarterback away. I thought they should have beaten, even with Phillip Rivers last year, I thought they should have beaten the Buffalo Bills last year. That's the truth. That's the reality. They were the better team last year, even in the wild card game. So, again, I have my reservations about Carson Wentz. I've always had those. But I am a believer in the Colts. I'm a believer in their culture. And I really like the direction that they're in. And I actually think that this is one of those under-the-radar offseason moves that will potentially result in a Super Bowl appearance. That's how highly I think of this move, and I think of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, there are other teams in the NFL that are trying to reach that pedestal, trying to reach that standpoint. Jacksonville Jaguars, of course, have had a busy offseason. They hire Urban Meyer to be their new head coach. Draft Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 overall pick. And then recently you signed Tim Tebow to be your tight end, to be a tight end. And apparently not everyone in the Jaguars organization and building is quote-unquote thrived and rather thrilled for that decision. They don't think that it sends the proper message, right, about this reunion. There's one thing that we know in business. There's a common adage that's used in business. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know. Connections are everything. Who you know in life can sometimes be, and oftentimes be, more valuable than what you know, because they can get you in the door. They can get you opportunities. That's the reality. And again, for better or for worse, that's how valuable connections are. And the other relevant term that's oftentimes thrown out in sports, and especially recently given the climate that we're in, is optics. How we perceive a certain decision, a certain action, a move. Optics are extremely important. And you're Urban Meyer. And the first thing you've done is you've swung on and struck out on the first opportunity for optics. Because what did you do? You hired the former Iowa strength and conditioning coach, Chris Doyle, who was just fired, or they reached a mutual resignation amid accusations of utilizing and using racial slurs and bullying. That is your first hire as the head coach. Then you obviously next day have to reverse course and fire him, because from an optics standpoint, they were horrific and they were abhorrent. For that to be your first hire, and then you turn around and you talk about culture, wanting to change the culture, and the guy you bring in is a guy in Tim Tebow who hasn't played in the NFL for 9 years. Now, Urban Meyer has built up a great reputation and tremendous cachet on the collegiate level, but he hasn't achieved anything yet on the NFL level. Guys haven't bought in yet at the NFL level. And so you hire a strength and conditioning coach. That's a bad hire. You have to fire him the next day. The only good thing you do is you draft Trevor Lawrence, which was the consensus number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. So you got that right. And now, to try and instill your own culture, the guy you bring in, at least to try out, again, whether or not he makes the 53-man roster, the guy that you bring in to try out as a tight end, and Tim Tebow, is your most devout follower and preacher of your methods. This is like Urban Meyer owns a missionary church, and Tim Tebow is his missionary, trying to spread the good word. And I don't even say that to insult Tim Tebow, because I think that when you look at NFL guys, Tim Tebow may be the biggest champion of faith. That's how devout of a man he is, and it's not a slight against Tim Tebow. Happy for him that he's given this opportunity. I hope he takes advantage of it and maximizes it. But if you're Urban Meyer, how can that be the only way you can get your messages across? He talks about how it's not the personnel, it's the culture. That it's not the players. You can't blame the players for going 1-15 last year. Who you have to blame is the culture that was established in this locker room prior to his arrival. I understand that, and I think that's a valid point, that turning around the culture can ultimately lead to more success. But if Tim Tebow is your only surrogate to deliver that message, that's a problem. You're telling me, if you're Urban Meyer, you don't have any other former players that have more credibility, that are in the NFL, that perhaps are already on your roster at the moment, that can't help cultivate that buy-in mentality, that winning culture that you're striving for? Tim Tebow is the only guy out there. Tim Tebow, again, he's 33. He hasn't played since the 2012 season. He didn't make the Eagles or the Patriots rosters in 2013. He basically gave up football to pursue baseball. All the power to him. He's a tremendous athlete, but he came up short in baseball. Now is going back into the NFL. And yes, he had one tremendous moment against the Denver Broncos with the Denver Broncos against the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 2011 playoffs. Hit Demaryius Thomas on that 10 to 15-yard crossing route over the middle. He goes untouched and wins in overtime on their first possession of overtime in the wild card round of the playoffs. But now you're asking him to be a tight end and to try and block defensive tackles, defensive ends that are coming with mean, bad intentions. This is a guy in Tim Tebow who's never caught a pass in his career at the high school or the collegiate level, let alone the NFL. And now you're asking him to put his hand in the dirt, even for a couple months in practice. I understand why there is some skepticism in that Jaguars organization. But again, it's about who you know. It's not about what you know. And the Urban Meyer, Tim Tebow relationship is real. And when you look at Urban Meyer and you think about the most success that he's had as a head coach, it was at Florida. And who was his quarterback? It was Tim Tebow. That stretch between 2006, 2009 was the most successful stretch of Urban Meyer's coaching career. He won 2 national championships in 2006 and 2008. Tim Tebow won the Heisman in 2007. And he's hoping that Tim Tebow can, again, help sprinkle that pixie dust on all the other grown men in the locker room. Again, I genuinely like Tim Tebow, what I've seen from him, what his beliefs are. Not necessarily agreeing with everything he has to say, but just the person that he is and who he tries to be, who he strives to be. I respect that from a professional standpoint. Wish him nothing but the best. But this is a very questionable decision, and it's no surprise why members within his own organization have their reservations and concerns. And I understand why they think from an optics standpoint it's not sending the best message. I would absolutely agree with that. Finally, this was an interesting story. Las Vegas Raiders are bringing the Wynn nightclub experience into their Raiders games. They're bringing in all their elite DJ lineup that features high-end DJs, and they're bringing that experience to the Las Vegas Raiders games at Allegiant Stadiums. It's going to be the Wynn Field Club. There's going to be 42 televisions, 9 by 35-inch LED screens. It's basically going to be right behind the end zone. It's going to be a bunch of booths, and you can order bottle service, and you'll have a DJ. Again, one of their high-end DJs playing. And Steve Wynn, who's the owner of Wynn Resorts, or at least was, now it's Matthew Maddox. Steve Wynn's obviously been involved with a number of opulent, high-end, ostentatious types of buildings and projects and real estate developments. And it's not a surprise. He's been involved with the Bellagio, the Mirage, Treasure Island, MGM Resorts, now the Wynn Resorts, obviously. And I've mentioned this before. Charles Darwin, the theory of evolution of natural selection, right? Talked about how people, it's all about the survival of the fittest, right? It's not the strongest species that survive, nor is it the most intelligent. It's the ones most adaptable to change. And throughout our entire society, the one thing that has constantly been involved in every single era that we've lived in is entertainment. Entertainment has always been a core foundation of the United States. New York, all about Broadway, entertainment. Los Angeles, entertainment. Even during world wars, what was the pastime? Television, movies, things that could send us away and make us imagine and believe, provided visuals to books, right? Entertainment has always been something that's captivated the minds of people. And when you look at society today, right, everything is all about enhancing user experience, enhancing consumer experience. The advent of technology, you have iPhones that are there to entertain. All the apps that are on the iPhones, what are they designed to do? To capture our attention span. That's what they're there to do. You're seeing more movies. There's streaming platforms offering more television series, more movies, more entertainment. And so sports at its very core is about competition for the athletes. But for the fans, it's all about entertainment. It's all about enhancing your viewing experience. And I think that this is absolutely a brilliant move on the part of the Las Vegas Raiders, because what they're recognizing is, hey, we are trying to make this an event. Instead of spending your hard-earned money on seeing Cirque du Soleil, you can spend the next 3 to 4 hours watching a football game in Las Vegas with bottle service, which we already know football games lend itself to more raucous crowds and atmospheres. And it leads to wealthy celebrities and affluent individuals who can flaunt their wealth and wear and get away with wearing the most bizarre, outlandish outfits ever. But they get away with it because they're celebrities, because they've got wealth and affluence. And it gives them an opportunity. We obviously know sporting events are all about, once you add alcohol into sporting events, you have fans yelling profanity-laced insults at guys who they deep down wish they could be. And I think that this is actually a brilliant move, a brilliant money grab to take advantage of people if they're saying, and I don't say it in a negative way, if you're already willing to go to Las Vegas. And we know the type of purse you have to have if you're going to Las Vegas and you're really trying to spend money. This is just an opportunity to enhance that experience for you. I mean, this is the ultimate compromise because, again, Vegas at its core is about entertainment. They're about entertainment. So I think that this will just further add to the viewership. Now, the only thing that needs to happen is the Raiders just have to be a good football team. Because if they can make the playoffs and be a good football team, then this move will be a great success. If they suck or if they underperform, it'll still probably sell, but it won't have the same meaning behind it. That's the one concern that I would have. But as far as a strategic standpoint, I think it's an absolutely brilliant move, and I think it will work. Again, deep down, what do these business owners, what do these NFL owners care the most about? It's the bottom line. And this is a way to omit a couple extra regular seats and instead offer a more exclusive package, right? We're all about exclusivity now, being in VIP sections. This is a way to make 4 times your money off of the same types of seats. And you're offering less seats, more revenue. Check, check, check. So I think it's a great move by the Allegiant Stadium. And I'm actually very fascinated. To be honest, if I had the money right now to try it, it would certainly be fun as hell to do it. If you had friends to go try that out with. So I have no problem with the Raiders opting for that route. Finally, wrapping up a little bit shorter today, my Maliks Moments. Got a great slate of Maliks Moments again for you. So the Nevada baseball star, Tyler Bassetti, just had eclipsed an NCAA record for 9 consecutive games with a home run, a record that has stood in the NCAA for 30 years. Tyler Bassetti now has hit 11 home runs in 10 games this year. In fact, only Georgia Tech's Andy Bruce, who homered 8 straight games in 1991, and Duke's Ryan Jackson, who matched that feat in 1994, only those 2 guys had a long, well, at the time, it was the longest consecutive home run streak in the NCAA. Now Tyler Bassetti has eclipsed that mark. Major shout out to him. And then Shohei Ohtani, the Angels dual pitcher, star pitcher and star batter. He's been unbelievable. And last night, yes, the Angels lost 5-1 to the Houston Astros. But if you looked at Shohei Ohtani, okay, yesterday, he pitches the first 7 innings of the game, gives up only 1 run, and throws 10 strikeouts. 10 strikeouts and 1 run given up. And it wasn't even consecutive hits allowed. It was 1 solo shot to the shortest part of MetLife Park. And in addition to that, at the top of the 8th, he's inserted back into the field to play right field. He played pitcher. He's the number 2 hitter on the team, and he played right field in the same game. In fact, so he's got a 2.10 ERA right now, 25 and 2/3 innings, a 903 on base OPS, 141 plate appearances. He became only the 3rd player since 1900. Yes, you heard that correctly, since 1900 to strike out 10 or more batters and then play another position, according to Elias Sports Bureau. And he threw 70% of his pitches for strikes. He throws 70% of his pitches for strikes, which is the highest rate of his major league career. He became the first pitcher in the modern era, which again dates back to 1900, to strike out 40 or more batters and allow fewer than a dozen hits over his first 5 starts of the season. In fact, he's hit 10 home runs this year, which is second most in the MLB behind Ronald Acuna Jr. Of the Braves. His strikeout rate, 14%, ranks 4th among pitchers with at least 25 innings. He has stolen 6 bases as well, which is tied for 9th in the MLB. This guy is more than just a dual player. I mean, that's selling him short if you're just calling him a dual pitcher and a batter. This guy is one of the most valuable players in baseball for everything that he brings, and Joe Madden has touched on this as well. It's quite remarkable. It's one thing to be a star pitcher. It's another thing to be a star batter. And even I went to a Dodgers game this year. Walker Buehler was pitching. He was the only guy to record a hit through the first 7 innings of the game. It's one thing to have an occasional blimp as a star pitcher, and you're not known to be a batter, and you get on base. It's something completely different when you are a star pitcher, and you're a star batter, and you play right field, and you're tied for second most home runs in the MLB. So, major shout out to him on what's been a tremendous, tremendous young career so far, coming off Tommy John surgery last season. And the kid out of Japan, he's been an absolute revelation. Cutting it a little bit short today. That's all the time that I got for you. Thank you so much for joining me on Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to like, follow on Twitter at morning_Joe_ at Jonah-Malkin on Twitter as well, and on YouTube. Subscribe Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Appreciate all the comments and the follows and subscriptions. Love the user engagement. Thank you so much. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.